After months of waiting, police finally arrested Lori Vallow in Hawaii in February 2020. The Kauai Police Department helped law enforcement in Idaho and the FBI to make it happen. She was charged with 5 counts at the time. The 2 felonies, desertion of a child, and her bail was set at a whopping $5 million, which, of course, she tried to fight, but the judge didn't budge, as the question still remained, the biggest question of them all: where are JJ and Tyler? I'm Kim Powell, and you're listening to True Crime Arizona, Lori Vallow's Deadly Delusions, Chapter 8, The Backyard. Throughout these episodes, we've been weaving in and out of the background of this case and new developments. The background itself is extensive, as you can tell, and it needs to be broken down to even understand the newest developments in this case. In this episode, we'll fill the biggest gap of them all. But first, we're heading back to Rexburg, Idaho. It's March 2020, and Lori Vallow is about to be extradited from the warm and tropical island of Kauai to the snowy and frigid small town in eastern Idaho. I've been reporting on this case for almost 2 years now, and it's been a wild one to cover. We had a ballpark estimate of when Lori would arrive, but given the growing popularity of the case and Lori's notoriety, U.S. Marshals were keeping it under wraps of when and how she would get there. Morgan Lowe and I left from Arizona to Idaho to meet her there, and we split into our own teams to try and find which airport she was flying into, from what airline, and when. And it was like piecing together a puzzle, an extremely complicated puzzle. There are obviously no direct flights from the Lihue Airport on Kauai to Idaho Falls, Idaho, so we knew she'd be jumping around. That's when the first clue came. She was spotted at LAX getting off a plane. She was in a black sweatshirt, being guided by 2 U.S. Marshals. Under her sweatshirt appeared to be a bulletproof vest. Her fellow passengers, shocked she'd be in commercial with them.
I got on the plane and she had actually sat in the back left corner. They went clear to the back. They were the first ones on, and she ducked down the majority of the flight because I think people were catching word that she was on the flight. She had chains, around her waist, but then her hands were in her sweater pocket, and I couldn't tell if she was cuffed or not.
A video of her being walked out of the plane quickly spread on Twitter. Then we had to guess, what is the next plane she boards? And maybe the one after that. In Rexburg, or Madison County, Idaho, the courthouse, sheriff's office, and the jail are all connected. We knew she'd end up there eventually, and so did everyone else. True crime junkies, BYU Idaho students, and other journalists wandered around the area for hours, waiting to catch a glimpse of the infamous Lori Vallow. I was staged outside of the bay doors at the jail with a few other reporters. They were open, a good sign that a new inmate was arriving soon. Morgan, however, got a tip that she would be arriving in a small plane at the Rexburg-Madison County Airport, and he got to ask the question we've all been dying to.
Lori, where are your kids?
She was quickly rushed away in a silver SUV.
It would be very easy for you to get out of this if you just told everybody where your kids were.
And then Morgan called me and told me to look out for that silver SUV, and they were about 15 minutes away. Reporters huddled around the bay door. Cones blocked off a clear driving path, and then a white van pulled in and the doors shut. Oh, wait, what about that silver SUV? I ran to the other side of the building, and sure enough, there it was. Lori was brought in at a side entrance, away from the public and cameras. The white van was a decoy. And then came one of the longest, coldest nights of my career. We knew Lori had to be processed and then walked across the courtyard into the women's detention center. So we waited hours and hours outside of the jail gate. The sun set, the temperatures dropped to 17 degrees, not a bathroom in sight. The true crime junkies and locals were standing out there, waiting and shivering with us. Of course, when she was finally taken over, We could barely see her because of all the safety measures officers were taking. Now, I bring all of this up just as an example to how popular this case had become. The next day was even more eye-opening. Lori was set to have an arraignment in front of a judge where they'd set her new bail. JJ and Tylee's grandparents had their own hopes and dreams for that day in court.
We're sitting there and in walks those two kids. That's my dream. From that moment on, I don't care what they do with Lori.
Yeah.
I don't care if Chad is involved or not, just so I know those kids are alive.
Hours before the arraignment, even more people showed up outside of the courthouse than the night before.
We're just here for Tylee and JJ. We want to know where they're at, and we're hoping that they're alive and well.
Dozens of people stood outside with signs saying, "Where are JJ and Tylee?" and "Bring the kids home." Others tied purple and blue ribbons in the trees.
One of the girls I spoke with actually knew Tylee.
The Madison County Courthouse is small, so they had to limit how many people were allowed inside for the hearing, and boy, did everyone line up quickly. Only 75 people were allowed in, everyone packed into the pews. The rules were strict: no pictures, no yelling, no interruptions. You could literally hear a pin drop. Then, Chad Daybell, Lori's husband, who has been on the run with her, walked in from a side door. The entire courtroom gasped and shifted in their seats. And no one can forget when Lori walked in, guided by deputies. A bulletproof vest was bulging out of her white and orange jumpsuit. Her hair was wavy and bleached, and her lips were bright pink from a jail-concocted lipstick. She glanced at her husband sitting in the front row.
State of Idaho versus Lori Noreen Vallow.
The hearing lasted about 30 minutes. Her attorneys fought hard to get her bond reduced. But the Idaho state prosecutor argued that Lori has defied court orders before, after she left during a welfare check of her children without notice. Plus, Lori hasn't cooperated with helping law enforcement find her two children.
The children are still missing, and the defendant has not only misled law enforcement in their efforts to find the children, but she has completely and utterly refused to aid in any attempts to find the children, even before charges were filed.
That day, the bond was lowered to $1 million. JJ and Tylee's grandparents said it doesn't matter if she posts bail. What matters is finding the missing children.
This is about finding two children. I want everybody, please, to keep that in mind in everything we do. Please, it's about two children.
Lori was walked back into the jail that day and hasn't been out since. Bondsmen in East Idaho had no desire to work with her, saying she had no collateral. And for almost 3 months, as the COVID-19 pandemic shut down the nation, there were still no answers. And then, detectives from several law enforcement agencies and the FBI swarmed Chad's property in the next town over from Rexburg, right on the county line. It was June 9th, 2020. Detectives set up a tent in Chad's backyard and scoured the nearly 4 acres, all while Chad watched from his driveway.
Hello?
Are you okay?
They're searching the property.
The house right now?
While investigators zeroed in on 2 burial sites, Lori called Chad from jail.
Mark means will be talking to you.
Okay. What, are they in the house?
No, they're out in the property.
Are they seizing stuff again?
They're searching. There's a search warrant.
Parts of the call are inaudible as Chad mumbles and Lori tries to comfort him. She offered to pray for him. He said, "We'll see what transpires."
I love you so much.
Okay, I love you. Should I try to call you later?
I don't know. I don't know. We can try.
That day, investigators found 7-year-old JJ's body near the Daybell's pet cemetery.
I observed a small child in red pajamas, red pajama shirt, red pajama pants, black socks.
17-year-old Tylee's body was found not far from there, dismembered and burned.
There was a melted green bucket that it appeared that the burnt flesh had been placed in. Under the bucket was a partial human skull.
As the bodies were unearthed, Chad left in his car, but he didn't make it far. He was arrested on the spot. His initial charges were concealing, destruction, and alteration of evidence. His wife, Lori, received those charges too. Lori's brother, Alex Cox, died 4 months after the kids disappeared, so he won't be facing any criminal charges. But the probable cause affidavit outlines that detectives believed Alex played a big role in JJ and Tylee's deaths. It was all thanks to his cell phone that they found their bodies, after all. According to the affidavit, an FBI unit analyzed Alex's cell phone and where it pinged on key dates, like on September 9th, 2019, the day after Tylee was last seen. Alex's phone was in his apartment in Rexburg, the same complex as Lori's, around midnight. But around 2:30 in the morning, he went to Lori's apartment. Detectives found that peculiar, seeing as his phone never put him there at those odd hours any time before. A couple hours later, just before 9:30 in the morning, Alex's phone pinged at a tower near Chad's property. He was behind the house, just east of the barn. He was there for about 2 hours before grabbing lunch at Del Taco and then spending the rest of his day in his apartment. And something else strange happened that day that FBI agents discovered. This time, on Chad's phone. He texted his wife, Tammy, a few minutes after Alex left the property. A detective read it at a court hearing.
Well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt I should burn all the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in our pet cemetery. Fun times.
This was odd to investigators for a number of reasons. Nonetheless, they felt it was Chad giving his wife an alibi in case anyone saw something strange in the backyard that September 9th morning. A similar pattern occurred on Alex's phone on the morning of September 23rd, a day after JJ was last seen. Alex's phone once again put him in Chad's backyard. This time, he was only there for less than 20 minutes. When investigators went to the Daybell property, the land spoke for itself.
There appeared to be, and this is just a guess, but about a 4x2 area of sod, what I can best describe as sod, in a shorter grass, in an area of longer weed growth. So that 4x2 area stuck out based on the greenery around it.
The FBI team removed a layer of sod. Underneath that were several large flat rocks, and then flat wood paneling, before investigators exposed a round object covered in black plastic.
Initially, as soon as they removed the paneling, I could smell the odor of a decomposing body. It was what appeared to be a small body tightly wrapped in black plastic, covered in duct tape.
JJ's grandparents were in the courtroom crying as the detective with the Rexburg Police Department described the gruesome discovery. They finally had the answer of where the kids were. And soon, the catchphrase of this case changed from "Where are the kids?" to "Justice for JJ and Tylee." But it wasn't until almost a year later that anyone faced charges for their deaths. In May 2021, a grand jury indicted Lori and Chad on 9 long-awaited charges.
Members of the grand jury deliberated and determined there is probable cause to believe the Daybells willfully and knowingly conspired to commit several crimes that led to the death of 3 innocent people.
Yes, they were charged for the deaths of 3 people, JJ, Tylee, and Chad was also charged for the murder of his previous wife, Tammy, though investigators haven't released what they found when her body was exhumed several weeks after her death.
Every little major step has meant something positive. But I think yesterday was that significant step forward where the grand jury has spoken.
Kay and Larry Woodcock were back in Idaho with us when the indictment was handed down, excited to finally see some action.
You can almost take a breath
and you know now it's real.
And somewhat symbolic, the charges were filed on JJ's birthday.
Yesterday was not a good day in the fact that it was JJ's birthday, and he's not here with us, 9 years old. I can only imagine what he would be like today at 9 years old. And it was a hard day for us. But on the other hand, it was a wonderful day that people are finally being held absolutely accountable for their misdeeds.
The charges include first-degree murder, conspiracy, grand theft, and insurance fraud.
As you read them, it was like, I don't know, everything, it's like the world just stopped, and it's like, okay, this is what we've been wanting to hear all this time, but yet I couldn't tell you what the charges were once he walked out of the room.
Investigators say Chad, Lori, and Alex used burner phones to hash out their plans. Lori cashed in on JJ and Tylee's Social Security funds, and they discovered Chad maxed out Tammy's life insurance policy shortly before she died. Investigators say Chad and Lori used their religious beliefs to justify the killings. But we'll get into that in the next podcast episode. Now, we're all caught up on what got us here today, where Chad is sitting in jail in Idaho facing the death penalty, while Lori, his new wife, is in a state hospital getting restorative treatment before she goes to trial. But in this case, are we ever really caught up? This podcast is written and reported by Kim Powell. Rick Oliveras is the producer-editor. True Crime Arizona, Lori Vallow's Deadly Delusions is a production of Arizona's Family, 3TV, and CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.